Hello, everyone, and welcome to the virtual public meeting for the I-95 Stamford Planning and Environment Linkages Study. It is now 12:01 p.m. and we will get started. My name is Marcy Miller, and I'll serve as the facilitator for today's meeting. I'm with FHI Studio, which is part of the Stantec consulting team. Welcome. Before we get into the meeting format and logistics, please know that we have Spanish interpreters at this meeting. I will ask them to introduce themselves and provide instructions to join the room and hear the translated version of the presentation and discussion.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Stephanie, soy una de las intérpretes. Zully, mi compañera, ya está en el canal de interpretación. Para poder tener acceso al canal de interpretación, tienen que darle clic al icono del globo que está en la parte baja de la pantalla de Zoom. Tienen que darle clic ahí para seleccionar el canal de español. Si está utilizando su celular o su tablet, tiene que darle clic al botón de los 3 puntos para buscar más opciones y buscar las palabras Language Interpretation, donde van a poder ver el canal de español. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to provide an overview for the format for our meeting this afternoon. This meeting is being recorded. If you do not wish to be part of a recorded meeting, please go ahead and disconnect. The recording and transcript will be posted to the project website. 9 attendees from the public are participating in the meeting today. I'm going to suggest a few tips on how to best participate in this virtual meeting. I know many of you are familiar with Zoom, but I'll briefly review a few tips to help you navigate the meeting today. This is a Zoom webinar as opposed to a Zoom meeting. It is slightly different with some more informal Zoom meetings that you may have participated in. To preserve bandwidth and have a smoother virtual meeting experience, you may want to close other programs that are running on your computer. If you have any issues with Zoom during the meeting, we have a technical support person available to assist you. You can reach this person, Laura Nagel, by email at lnagle@fhistudio.com. You can also use the Q&A feature if you need technical help with Zoom. If you are disconnected at any point during this meeting or are having bandwidth issues with your internet, there is an option to telephone into the meeting. You can use the toll-free number on your screen to access the meeting if you are disconnected, or joining by phone is simply a better option for you. That number is 646-931-3860. If you telephone in, you will need to enter the meeting ID, which is 819-9660-1445. The passcode is 572113. Lastly, Zoom is generating closed captions for this meeting that should be showing up at the bottom of your screen. If you are seeing them and want to turn them off, or if you are not seeing them and want to turn them on, you can do so by clicking the button in your Zoom toolbar that says CC. After my short discussion of housekeeping items, I will turn it over to the team to provide a presentation on the I-95 Stamford PEL study. After that, we will turn to the discussion session when members of the public will have the opportunity to share comments. Today, all participants are placed on mute until the discussion period, which will follow the 30-minute presentation. During the discussion period, there are 2 ways you can provide feedback or ask a question. The first is through raising your hand to speak aloud to the study team and all participants. We will also accept and respond to written questions during the discussion period. We will alternate attendee participation between the raised hand speaking method and the Q&A written method. Our goal is to get feedback from everyone today. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. After the presentation, at the beginning of the discussion period, I'll invite anyone here today to share comments. You can indicate that you would like to share a comment by raising your hand. You will be identified with a yellow hand toward the top of the participant list. This means that you are requesting to speak. If you are not seeing the raise hand in your Zoom toolbar, you may need to click on Participants in your Zoom toolbar. Then the button will show up at the bottom of the window in the Participants pane. Please turn this function on so you can see when your turn is coming up. If you are calling in by phone, you can press *9 to raise your hand and we will be able to call on you. When it is your turn to speak, I will call out your name. Our technical host will request that you unmute yourself. Please click unmute before you begin speaking. When we unmute you, please state your name slowly and spell your first and last name for us. If applicable, please indicate any organization that you are affiliated with. Please be mindful of time so that everyone has an opportunity to speak. I will ask you to wrap things up at the 5-minute mark. Please note, if your comments are lengthy, you can submit them in writing. We will identify ways that you can do this later in the presentation. All comments provided today will be taken into consideration by the Department of Transportation. The comments you make today will be recorded and summarized in a meeting summary. We will also be taking written questions throughout the meeting. Staff will provide answers to your submitted questions during the discussion period. Please submit questions via the Q&A button in Zoom. Representatives of the media can direct their inquiries to the Connecticut Department of Transportation Office of Communications at ctdotmedia@ct.gov. No person on the basis of race, color, or national origin shall be excluded from participation or subject to discrimination in the development of this project. Connecticut Department of Transportation has more information in a civil rights flyer that's located at the following website. The website is https://bit.ly/CIVILRIGHTS. Excuse me. The department is also asking members of the public to visit and complete a demographic survey at https://bit.ly/ctdot-feedback. We are adding these links to the chat feature in Zoom now. John?
All right, thank you, Marcy. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Dean. I am the project manager from Connecticut DOT working on this study. I'm going to introduce our study team from Connecticut DOT. Mike Calabrese is the Division Chief of Highway Design. Neil Patel is the Principal Engineer of the Major Highways Unit. Again, I'm the project manager, and Joe Belrose is the project engineer. So the folks you'll be hearing from today, myself, Emily Valentino, who is the project manager from Stantec, who is the lead consultant on the study. Andrew Lassard is the bridge engineer. Najma Jami is the traffic engineer. And Marcy Miller, whom you've already met, is the community engagement lead from FHI Studio. So this afternoon's agenda, we'll have the welcome and introductions, which you just heard. We'll give a brief overview of the project. We'll present the findings of our needs and deficiencies analysis that we recently completed. And we'll introduce our preliminary purpose and need that will define the improvements made under the study. We'll talk about the universe of alternatives that we're considering, and we'll talk about the next steps in the study as well. So now I'll give a brief overview of the project. Here's the location plan showing the limits that we're looking at under this I-95 Stamford PEL. So the limits begin at exit 7 to the west and end at exit 9 to the east. I do want to note here we are showing exit 6 as well. So there's another project that's currently in construction between exit 6 and 7 on both the northbound and southbound sides of 95. So we wanted to make sure our traffic analyses capture any influence of that project. And we're looking at the ramps as well as the I-95 main line. And then moving out a little bit further onto the city streets, we're looking up at Route 1, also known as Tresser Boulevard, and others, East Main Street and West Main Street in the study area, and some of the other parallel and crossing roadways. And not to forget Bridge 32, which is just in the the right-hand side of the screen there. That is really one of the main drivers of this project. That's a bridge that is advanced in age. It was recently rehabilitated, so we'll talk about this a little later, but a main focus of this project is to look at the future, either major rehabilitation or replacement of that structure. So the goals of the study, identifying the existing environmental conditions, what we call the built environment, things like historic resources, some of the challenges and constraints in the project area. Again, we'll talk about this preliminary purpose and need, which will help define what we do to make improvements in this area. We'll develop project alternatives, and those will eventually be screened to a small number that will go into the future more rigorous environmental review under NEPA, or the National Environmental Policy Act. I should also mention too that one of the goals of this study is to identify early action projects, as we call them, and on other studies that can be done sooner, smaller projects, like it could be an intersection improvement that would help improve conditions prior to the longer term project being done. Next slide, please. So here's a conceptual visualization of our project schedule. So this is the second public workshop. If you missed the first one that we did, it's on our website. We'll have links to that later on in the presentation, but the recording is up there. So we've done a lot of the existing and future data collection and traffic analysis. And now we're starting to get into the development of alternatives, and evaluation and screening will be in the future, as I mentioned, and we'll have further public workshops throughout the process. So this won't be the last time. And now I'll turn it over to Andy.
All right, thanks, John. And good afternoon, everyone. So we have, as part of the project, we conducted a needs and deficiencies analysis, and this is where we're taking a look at the existing infrastructure conditions and configuration, and identifying where there are some deficiencies compared to current design standards. Here we're looking at such things as the bridges, I-95 main line and ramps, and then also the local roads. And before I get into talking about the bridges particular to this particular project, I wanted to give some high-level definitions of some of the terminology that you'll hear as I'm talking. So as we're looking at a bridge, we're looking at three main components. The first being the deck, and this is the portion of the bridge that directly carries the traffic. And here in Connecticut, typically this is made up of reinforced concrete. Now the deck itself is supported by the superstructure. So again, this superstructure spans across substructures and distributes the load from the deck through the superstructure down to the substructure. And the substructure is the part of the bridge that carries the loads from the superstructure down into the ground. And typically here in Connecticut, this you might expect to see this being made up of reinforced concrete, and sometimes you'll see some steel bents there as well. Now, as we're looking at the bridge condition, we need to use a set of standardized ratings to assess this. So the state of Connecticut inspects bridges typically every 2 years, sometimes more frequently depending on the bridge condition. Each component of the bridge is given a rating of 0 to 9, with 0 being a failed condition and 9 being an excellent condition. Now you can see the scale that is used to the right of the slide here. And the state generally endeavors to keep bridges in a state of good repair, SOGR. You can see there in that scale. And that means that the bridge components have condition ratings of 5 or greater, fair or greater. So there are 12 bridges in this study area, and these bridges rate structurally from satisfactory 6 to fair 5. But it's important to note that these bridges are safe to drive on. However, regular maintenance is required to keep them in a state of good repair. And also major upgrades are anticipated in order to keep these bridges in a state of good repair for the long term. So looking in particular for bridge deficiencies noted for bridges in this project area, John mentioned Bridge 32, which really was the impetus for this particular project. If you live in the area, you're aware that this bridge had undergone a pretty significant repair project over the past couple of years. And that actually brought this bridge to a state of good repair with ratings of 5 for the deck, the substructure, and the superstructure. However, this rehabilitation extended the serviceable life just by about 10 to 15 years or so. And the bridge was built in the 1950s and has really reached pretty much the end of its useful life. So that's part of the reason for this study is what are we going to do to this bridge for the next 50, 75, 100 years. Other important thing to note on this bridge is the narrow roadway width. As you've driven across it, I'm sure you'll note that it necks down as it crosses over the Metro North span. And that's also a deficiency. The second bridge that we had noted deficiencies aren't structural, but more functional. And that's Bridge 36, which is Blatchley Road over I-95. And this particular deficiency is the curb-to-curb width. Given the number of lanes on the bridge and the measurement from the curb to curb, it rates a 4 for functional adequacy for this particular structure. Now, with that, I'll turn it over to Emily, who'll talk about some of the roadway deficiencies on the main line as well as the local roads. Emily?
Thank you. So Andy just went through some bridge deficiencies. I'll start talking about I-95 mainline deficiencies. And when we say mainline, that's just a way to delineate or denote the through traffic versus the ramp. So we talk about mainline and we'll talk about ramps. So I'll start with the physical deficiencies, so how the highway was built. In some cases, we have tight highway curvature. So you'll see the aerial view on the left. There is a curve on the highway. And you can see the point of view from the driver on the right-hand side is slightly limited. So it would cause a driver to slow down and enable the driver to have enough reaction time to slow down in case there was congestion ahead or an incident ahead. In the study area, there are also narrow shoulders, both on the inside and the outside. And the shoulder, usually you like to design it so it's wide enough for a vehicle to fit in. So if it does, if somebody runs out of gas or blows a tire, they're able to pull outside of the travel lane and not block traffic on the main line. In our case, however, there is not enough room for those vehicles to recover and pull off the main line to break down. So broken down vehicles must stop in the main line and create congestion. They block a lane, and it is a safety issue as well if a vehicle is stopped on the main line. There are also short or missing entry and exit lanes. I'll talk about what that means. An entry lane being when you enter from a ramp onto the main line. Ramps, typically you'll be driving at a slower speed. And then you need to get up to speed. So say the ramp is 25 miles an hour and the main line is 55. You need room to accelerate to get up to the same speed as the vehicles on the main line so that when you merge in with them, you're all going the same speed and it's a lot easier to maneuver. Same goes for off ramps. You want space outside of the main line to be able to slow down so you don't impede traffic on the main line. However, in our case, there are short or sometimes non-existent spaces to speed up or slow down. That can be seen at exit 9. So this is the northbound direction on exit 9. You can see there isn't, you can see where the dotted line is. There's not much space really to slow down before you reach the ramp. So vehicles in this case will slow down on the main line and cause people behind them to also have to slow down. So we talked about physical deficiencies. Now we'll talk a little bit more about operational deficiencies, and we'll start with travel time and congestion. So you can see the graphic on the right. Our study area is about a little over 3 miles long, and that's from interchange 6 to interchange 9. When there's no congestion, travel is about 68 miles per hour, and that takes 4 minutes. However, during the congested times, and that's in the morning and the evening, in the southbound direction in the morning, that time goes up to 16 minutes, and that's about a 12-minute delay. And in the northbound in the evening, that takes about 10 minutes to travel. So that's a 6-minute delay. So speeds can get down to about 12 miles per hour in peak times. You might remember this slide from the last presentation, the last public workshop. What we do with the existing traffic data, we put it into a traffic model and we run an analysis. And the model results in and classifies the roadway into a level of service. We'll call that LOS. So LOS A and B is the best case scenario. There are no delays. LOS C and D, there are some minimal and moderate delays, but it is considered acceptable. And then LOS E and F, that would be when there are significant delays, and that would be considered deficient. So what did the model say about the southbound morning peak? If you've driven in this segment of roadway in the morning, this probably won't surprise you. Most of the study area is failing. So that's LOS E or F, and you can see that by the red coloring from interchange 9 all the way to 6. Some of the reason for this congestion, you can go to the previous slide. Along with, of course, lots of vehicles on the road, so the capacity of the main line isn't enough to accommodate the vehicles. But on top of that, there are high volume weaving areas between ramps. We'll get into what that means in a moment. There are closely spaced on-ramps, and there's downstream congestion, which limits the number of vehicles that can even get through past the study area. So now we'll look at, first we'll describe what is a weaving lane. I mentioned before, when you are exiting or entering the main line, you want space kind of outside that main line to speed up or slow down. And in some instances, that space is the same for entering and exiting vehicles. So you can imagine that does create a little more of a hectic scenario where vehicles are speeding up, slowing down. You have to make space for vehicles to merge with that are going at different speeds. So this can create congestion. And we can look to see where that an example of where that happens in the southbound direction between the entrance from Route 1, which is interchange 9, and getting off at exit 8. So there are 700 vehicles in the morning that enter from that ramp, and they are having to merge and jockey with those 1,500 vehicles that are exiting the highway. So those two high volume ramps and all of the merging will create some of that congestion that you see on the main line. Another reason for congestion on the main line is closely spaced entrance ramps. So you can imagine you're on the main line, any vehicle that comes on from a ramp, vehicles that are traveling on the main line will have to either slow down to let the vehicle in, or they'll have to merge over into another lane to allow them space to get on the highway. When you couple two together in such close proximity, so these ramps are only about 900 feet apart, which is considered deficient. When you couple two of those together, it really just exacerbates all the braking that has to happen, the merging, and really impedes the speeds on the main line. Northbound direction, similar reasons for the congestion. However, there are pockets of acceptable LOS. So you can see the yellow, LOS C or D, but there are also pockets of, again, that failing LOS E and F, and for the same reasons we saw in the southbound direction. So there's high volume weaves, they're closely spaced on-ramps, and there's downstream congestion north of the study area. We also did a crash analysis of the study area. This is a 5-year period from 2016 to 2021. Now, this doesn't include some of the recent fatalities that you might have read about in the news. So as the study progresses, we will be doing an updated crash analysis with newer data. So you'll see that in subsequent public workshops. But for now, the data stops in 2021. And on the right is what we call a hotspot, so a heat map. And the darker the red circle means the more crashes that occur at that location. And you can see there are clusters on the curves, as well as when a ramp enters or exits the main line. Most of these crashes on the main line are rear end or overtaking. Overtaking means when you're merging to change lanes. And there were 4 fatalities in the 5-year period. Now we'll get to the local roadway deficiencies, but we'll first start with what is the scope of our local roadway study within this PEL study. So what we first did is we reviewed the conditions in the study area on the local roadways. So we looked at transit service, pedestrian and bicycle conditions, and we will then identify potential improvements to assist with those needs and deficiencies, and as it relates to transit access and ped and bike connectivity, as well as safety, of course, as a blanket over everything, always. We'll then evaluate those improvements and how they impact the study area, as well as how they might impact how people use transit, ped, and bike facilities. We also did a crash analysis on the local roadway, so we'll start with that. Same 5-year study period, so same thing applies. The recent fatalities will not be shown on the screen, but go up in subsequent workshops. There were 4 fatalities, and you can see kind of outlined in that red box on the right, there is a hot spot along Tresser Boulevard with 3 fatalities almost in a row there. So of course, that it's a prominent place we will study. And most of the crashes, similar to the main line, were rear end crashes. And we understand that pedestrian and bicycle safety is a big issue in Stamford. The data, we heard it from you, the data backs it up. And so we pulled out that information to display and show really what's going on. To start, the blanket, 34 of the 50 studied intersections in our study area have at least one ped or bike crash. So what you see on the screen are really just the hot spots, and that is where there is either a fatality or 3 or more ped or bike crashes. And you'll remember from the previous slide, there were 4 fatalities on the local roadways. And this is showing that 3 of which were pedestrian or bicycle fatality. So that really just drives the point home that pedestrian and bicycle safety is of the utmost importance in Stamford. What could contribute to this? We'll start with high-level deficiencies on the local roadways. There is limited connectivity, and that's specifically north and south for the most part, underneath I-95. There's limited bicycle facilities, and that's really in the east-west direction on the north side of I-95. There are long pedestrian crossings, especially across Tresser Boulevard. There's a lack of ADA compliant sidewalks and crosswalks. There is limited lighting under the bridges, and there is limited transit amenities. So I'll show some examples of that now. And this is the underpass under I-95. We're on Elm Street looking north. And you can see straight off the bat, it's daytime, but it's still dark. So we know that lighting is an issue underneath these overpasses. You can see on the left, the sidewalk looks quite narrow, and there's no physical separation between any pedestrian that would use that sidewalk and a vehicle. Similarly, there's no physical separation. If you look on the right-hand side of the screen, there's a shared bike lane that's against the wall. There is no separation between the bikes and the vehicles. They're actually in a shared lane there. So it's somewhat uncomfortable to walk or bike underneath these underpasses. So that is part of our scope of the study. Also mentioning some of the those long crossing distances that I mentioned. So there's no pedestrian refuge here at these specific locations. So that's Elm at Tresser and Washington at Tresser. So pedestrian refuge is a physical barrier and a safe space for pedestrians to wait and pause. So if they can't cross the full length of Tresser in one go, they can wait in the middle in this physical separated barrier for the light to change again. However, at these specific locations, there are no pedestrian refuges. So we've gotten through the deficiencies for the bridges, the main line, the local roadway. Now we'll talk a little more about the draft preliminary purpose and need. So John mentioned that at the beginning. We'll start with what is a purpose and need. A purpose and need is a statement. It defines the transportation problems, and it identifies the needs that can help guide the alternatives analysis process. So we want this statement to be clear, specific, and comprehensive. What goes into a purpose and need statement, we'll talk about next. That is goals and objectives of the study. Again, John mentioned that at the beginning. Transportation deficiencies, everything Andy and I just talked about. And of course, throughout the whole process, public and agency input. So your feedback is important to us, and we would love to hear from you. Next, we'll talk about a little bit of the components. So there's two components to a purpose and need statement. There is a primary purpose, and that is what drives the project. So it's really why, the goals as to why the project is justified. There are also other desirable outcomes. So these are considered secondary purpose and need components. And these are additional goals that are desirable, but they don't act as the core purpose of the project. They could be considered as a factor when selecting alternatives, but they, again, aren't the core purpose. But these would be maybe more on the local roadways, and that relates to what John mentioned as some of those early action alternatives that you would see would likely be part of the secondary purpose and need. So now, what is the primary purpose of this project? Twofold. Number one, to improve mobility along the 3.2 mile section of I-95 between the study area, and that's exit 7 to 9. And two, to improve the crossing of I-95 over the Metro North Railroad and Myrtle Ave such that that crossing is in a state of good repair. So what Andy mentioned before, and that's really a shout to Bridge 32, which was the impetus of this project. Secondary purpose and need or other desirable outcomes of the project. We have one, to increase mobility for all users, and that's under I-95 as well as in the local roadway network immediately adjacent to I-95. The second one was an addition based on feedback from the public, so thank you for this. This was to enhance cross-connection of communities adjacent to I-95, so that's those north-south connections, and specifically under the I-95 overpass. We've got number 3, that is improve transportation facilities to provide increased opportunities. So that's bus stops, bike lanes, up to standard crosswalks. And that wants to make transportation choice and ease of use for the local communities. And that's including traditionally underserved communities. And our last point here for the other desirable outcomes is to, of course, reduce the impact to the local and regional community by minimizing construction duration and disruption. So we went through the first few steps of the project, and that's outlining the goals, the needs and deficiencies. I just went through the purpose and need. The next step is to develop project alternatives, and that starts with creating a universe of alternatives that Najma will discuss right now. Najma?
Thanks, Emily. So as Emily mentioned, one of the initial steps in the process of developing alternatives is to set up what we call a universe of alternatives. Think of this as a brainstorming realm where we toss in various transportation improvement concepts and ideas, and this serves as a toolbox for us so we can evaluate different options. And through screening, we identify which one is more workable and feasible for our study area. And then ultimately, we can determine the final recommended alternatives for our project. So to create a universe of alternatives, we assembled a matrix, which, as you can see on this slide, include 5 major categories of transportation improvements: no build, transportation demand management, transportation system management, mass transit, and improve existing corridor. Each of these categories is a collection of diverse concepts and ideas, as I mentioned, for us to consider and evaluate their feasibility for our project. And although not all of the options that make it through our initial list of universe of alternatives may satisfy the purpose and need of these projects, they can still serve as a valuable and complementary feature to improve overall mobility of our transportation network and its safety. So in the next few slides, we're just going to look at each category and see how some examples of each of these could look like. The first category is simple. No build. The project does not advance, and then we continue with the ongoing maintenance. The second category is transportation demand management. This approach is about reducing overall demand for our transportation network, and it's just not about improving infrastructure for vehicular modes, but also look at the strategies that can offer more sustainable travel options, from park and ride facilities to encouraging other modes of transportation, such as cycling, walking, and carpooling, or implementing HOV or express lanes. Moving to the next category, which is transportation system management, or TSM. This approach aimed to optimize the existing transportation network using data and technology to make the best of what we already have, rather than expanding our roadway or building new infrastructure. And it focuses on approaches that leverage real-time traffic conditions to make dynamic decisions to improve mobility and safety of the system. So one example of that is ramp metering, which you can see on this slide. It involves installing a traffic signal on a freeway on-ramp, and that controls the rate at which cars can enter the flow of traffic to the main line. And that control is based on the real-time traffic conditions of the main line. So by that controlling, it actually can help to some degree to alleviate the congestion and improve the safety of the whole freeway system. Other examples of that are variable speed limits, traffic signal optimization, and traffic control. Moving to the next one, which is mass transit. Under this category, we delve into approaches to enhance transit infrastructure. We consider transit investment options to improve the efficiency of public transportation, which could contribute to a more sustainable and accessible transportation network. Under this category, we can consider concepts on a very large scale, such as introducing or expanding bus, streetcar, or rail services, or on a more localized level. This improvement could include implementing dedicated bus lane or upgrading bus station. And for all those options, the aim is to provide a better overall experience for transit users and encourage more people to choose public transportation. And the final category in our universe of alternative focuses on improving existing corridors, which are relevant to both I-95 mainline and local roadways. First, let's look at the concept of the mainline. We have talked about that a key driver of this project is to improve the efficiencies of Bridge 32. And while we consider various solutions for that bridge, we're also looking at the ways which can be combined with those solutions to not only facilitate the reconstruction or rehabilitation of the bridge, but also improve overall mobility of I-95 within our study area. And this can be achieved by reconstruction portion of the I-95 in Stamford. We can also consider ways under this category to improve existing features of the main line and some of the deficiencies that Emily talked about, such as deficient curvature or side distance, and bring those features up to standard. Also, under this category, we will look at improving local roadway connection to ramp termini. Now let's see how some of these concepts could look like. For example, express lane. Construction of express lane is one method to consider that can increase the capacity of the main line by providing designated a lane for longer distance trips. And this can be achieved by either elevated express lane, as you can see on the left, or at-grade express lane in the middle of the existing alignment. Another example that can be considered in a high level is a construction of a tunnel. You can see on the right, a tunnel concept can actually provide a significant amount of space above for local roadways that can be utilized for various purposes. But at the same time, it demands a significant amount of right-of-way and space to be during the construction, as you can see on the left side. And also because of the Metro North Railroad, for our case, the construction of the tunnel is required to be even deeper than it usually is required. So under this category for local roadway improvements, we also look at options, and we aim to explore the options that reflect the need and preference of our local communities to create a more inviting environment for every traveler. And we consider concepts to improve safety, efficiency, and mobility of our transportation network in our study area. Some of these concepts are improving ramp termini intersection with local roadways, and enhancing underpasses to accommodate various modes of transportation, such as pedestrian and cyclists, and also improving community connectivity through that accommodation. And we will look at ways to improve lighting, which we know is a problem in our study area. Through this category, we also seek opportunities to promote various transportation choices to make local communities, especially the traditionally underserved one, more accessible. And of course, we'll look at ways to improve safety, such as traffic calming measures. As we've seen through this section, we have included a wide range of options and concepts for our universe of alternative. These are all high-level options that we are going to consider, and further on through more screening and evaluation, we will identify the solutions that are more feasible for our study area, and ultimately this will lead us to determine our final recommendation for our project. And with that, I'll pass it over to Marcy, who's going to talk about next steps.
All right, thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about what the study team is going to be working on in the coming months. So, our goal now is to receive public, agency, elected official comments on what's presented today, particularly the purpose and need and the draft universe of alternatives. We want to know what you like, don't like, even what we're missing. And we want to move forward and eliminate those components from the universe of alternatives that are unfeasible. We want to get down to a solution that's manageable as quickly as possible, but yet be thorough. So those are things that, we'll be looking to do with the universe of alternatives. And then we move forward and we start really developing conceptual solutions, things that may make a lot of sense. We're going to continue to seek public and elected official and agency comments on all of these things. And ultimately, these conceptual solutions move into what we call project alternatives, and that goes through a screening process. And we present those findings out. I'll show the schedule again that John presented earlier, where we will be going to the public again. We will continue to present this stuff to our project advisory committee, and then finally, once we get feasible alternatives, we prepare a final, what we call PEL study report. And here is that schedule again. And you notice we are here, but we also have the opportunity for more public workshops. And we have plenty of other ways that you can keep tabs on the study and give us your feedback. As for engagement, I mentioned the public workshops. That next one will be, think like six months-ish, in the summer, fall 2024. In the meantime, we'll continue stakeholder outreach. We've met with a lot of different stakeholder groups, neighborhoods, advocacy groups, businesses. We will continue to do that. Our website is robust. We ask you to go there. This meeting is being recorded, and the recording and ultimately the notes and the presentation will all go on the website after the meeting. We're doing regular social media notifications. I encourage you to follow us and repost, and we'll provide that information momentarily. And we hope a lot of you heard about this because you're on our contact list for e-bulletins. If you're not, please go on our website, sign up, and we'll get you on that. And then finally, we do track all comments, responses, and our contacts, because this is what feeds what becomes our alternative. So we are tracking that. So I know there's a few people that hopped on since the beginning of the call. So what I'm going to do is I'll just quickly go through again how we're going to manage the discussion. And so during the upcoming discussion period, there's two ways to provide feedback or ask a question. The first is through raising your hand to speak aloud. And the second is to write your questions in the Q&A. And If you are in on Zoom with your computer, you can raise your hand button. That's that little red hand. If you don't see it, click on the participants tab and it should show up there. Then you'll be identified with a yellow hand and you'll move to the top of the list. And that's the order that we will go in. If you're not seeing that raise hand, remember, click that participant list. It will show up at the bottom, and keep the function on so you know where you are in the line. If you've called in, and I see we do have one person that has phoned in, you can press *9 to raise your hand, and then we can call on you that way, and you'll go into the queue. When it's your turn to speak, John Dean, he will call out your name. We apologize for mispronunciations, and then we will request that you unmute yourself. You need to click your unmute button before you begin speaking. Once you've begun, please state your name. And then if you can spell it, that would be great for us too, so we can document that correctly. If you're affiliated with an organization, please let us know that as well. We're asking that you are mindful of time so everyone has an opportunity to speak. And if needed, we might ask you to wrap things up after the 5-minute mark. Please note, if your comments are lengthy, you are welcome to write them into us. And the other option is to write your questions in the Q&A, and we will read those questions aloud, so those that have called in will be able to hear what they are, and we will answer them aloud as well. And the one thing I want to close with is that we will alternate between the raising of the hands, and I see we have one already, and then the Q&A method. So John will go back and forth. He'll answer a few of the hands raised, and then he'll go to the Q&A. Our goal is to get feedback from everyone today. So with that, I will turn it over to John.
All righty. Thank you, Marcy. Yeah, as Marcy mentioned, we do have a hand raised. So Michael Tyrrell, again, apologize if I mispronounce anybody's name. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, great. So I just have, I guess, a general comment and question briefly. I manage the Facebook page BRT Fairfield, New Haven, which advocates for bus rapid transit. And, I realize there's all kinds of constraints. You've got to work with what you have. I've listened carefully to the presentation, and I understand the constraints, budgets, schedule, and so on. And again, working with what you have is an important priority because it's what people can relate to the most. But I guess my question is, do these improvements, do they take into consideration the addition of bus rapid transit through Stamford and beyond into the future? I think that's the most important consideration. And, I saw the viaduct you had there. I think adding lanes would be terrific if it were exclusively for bus rapid transit and high occupancy vehicles. It's a big ticket item. It's something, it's something that requires advocacy from the governor's office. You've got Connecticut Fast Track up between Hartford and New Britain, so it's not like it's a foreign notion. The state has BRT running there. And when reconstruction of the I-94 viaduct begins, and I don't mean to get off topic, but when that begins, that line is going to increase in ridership quite substantially. You can bet on that. So that's I guess my basic question is, will this section of a perhaps future broader project take seriously the notion that you could have BRT running from New Haven to Stamford, and would it preclude having a BRT system? And is that something you're being careful not to preclude? So that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. Yeah, so I guess I will say that, we are looking at, and as you kind of alluded to, this kind of particular stretch of I-95 in Stamford between exits 7 and 9. So, I think what you discussed is a regional approach that, we may be able to work with other plans that come into motion over time. So make sure that we can incorporate them or not preclude them, as you mentioned. But as far as what we're going to be able to do specifically on I-95 Stamford is probably going to be more localized to the city of Stamford. And it could, I think that universe of alternatives could include some other types of transit improvements, such as some of the facilities and amenities, things like transit signal priorities on the city streets. We know there's some bus lanes there already on the urban transit way. So if there are other connections that can be facilitated, especially when we look at some of these rail underpasses that are currently very narrow, are there opportunities to identify places where those could be widened under a future project that would replace those structures and provide room for other types of travel, not just bus or but bicycle, pedestrian as well. So I can't speak to bus rapid transit specifically, but we are trying to look at things holistically, and we are working with other partners as well. So the city of Stamford, we're working with CT Transit, our own Office of Transit and Ride Sharing in department. So making sure that we stay abreast of all the plans that are going on throughout the various parts of the department and the region. I'm going to go to Dave Adams now. I think he was the next one with his hands up. I think you can unmute now.
Hi, my name's Dave Adams. I'm a resident of Stamford. I've done some significant traveling across the state and in other states, and these HOV lanes, if you are considering them, seem to be illogical in most of their applications, because in order to create this HOV lane, there is a large separation of real estate between the HOV lane and the rest of traffic, and the result is a loss in real estate for actual travel. So I'm just interested as to whether or not that is a consideration. Obviously, all of this stretch of I-95 is elevated to begin with, and it would be a challenge to add lanes, north or south of each roadway without overhanging onto the existing traffic routes. I mean, how seriously are you considering installing an HOV lane with such a separation as you would see in, say, like Hartford or Waterbury?
Yeah, so we're kind of at a point right now where it's kind of a blank slate where we're looking at, this is the universe of alternatives that could be considered. I think we'll give everything an equal amount of consideration to begin with. So the way the process is expected to work is, so we'll have various levels of screening where we say we take that universe and we pass it through a number of sieves they'll start getting smaller. So as we start to screen out some of these ideas, some of them may merit more detailed examination than others. So when we talk about those express lanes, as you mentioned, there's going to be major challenges in terms of either expanding the footprint of the highway horizontally or trying to build vertically upward. Either of those would come with a large price tag and impacts to many other aspects of the city. So those may not end up being as scrutinized as some of the other things that we can do, other strategies that we can do. So I would say stay tuned. We'll have all of this process will be transparent as we move forward in these future public workshops. We'll have ways to visualize those and explain the process. Angelo, you have your hand up. Should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Hi, my name is Angelo. You already know me. I'm a member of the Project Advisory Committee, and I also serve on the Executive Committee of People Friendly Stamford. Please forgive my voice. I am getting over a cold right now. I wanted to, I guess, sort of in response to that, remind everyone involved with the project that here in Connecticut, for DEEP, the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, I believe it is, transportation in Connecticut accounts for about 40% of greenhouse gas emissions, and that the Connecticut Department of Transit has made it a stated goal to reduce vehicle miles traveled. I'm a little skeptical that the addition of such express lanes would run counter to both of those initiatives. And as you mentioned, Jonathan, would also be very challenging given the real estate of 95 running through this area. It would present significant challenges, and I'd advise against expanding the physical footprint of it. And I think it would also, worsen noise and air pollution in the area, which I am concerned about. But the question that I have is actually about something you mentioned earlier, and that is in regard to transportation facilities in the area. And I really do applaud the project's intent to sort of improve those facilities, perhaps add, more bus signage, more protected bus shelters, maybe even more benches, more lighting. I think that that's all great. I just wanted to ask as well if changes to transit service is being considered within the scope of this, given that CT Transit Stamford runs buses along I-95, such as the bus to White Plains, and buses parallel, such as the buses to Darien and Norwalk. So I just wanted to ask if any changes or improvements to transit services is being considered in tandem with potential upgrades to transit facilities in the study area.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Angelo, for your comments and for your question. Yeah, so I think as far as the operations go, we're mostly looking at the physical implementation of, as you mentioned, things like amenities and more of the kind of infrastructure side of it rather than the operations. But as I mentioned, we are in constant communication with Connecticut Transit and the operators out there. So it's a two-way dialogue as we gather information and comments like this. As we hear of things that folks want, we can certainly share that with them and kind of help to any efforts that they might be considering to look at their operations in this area. So again, it's not strictly part of this study, but it's part of the department's mission and the various entities that we're working with in this area. I see Jerry Silber has his hand up. You should be able to unmute now.
Yeah, hi. So you've presented a pretty comprehensive study. I just want to throw in my 2 cents to say that things like increasing safety, having ways for pedestrians and bicycle riders, for example, to get underneath some of those bridges. You showed pictures of where there's really no room other than a sharrow on the road, which really doesn't provide a lot of safety. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents to say, that I think that ought to be a priority of what you come up with.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I should take this opportunity to highlight. So the department's had a complete streets policy for a number of years now to design with complete streets in mind, which that's a term that we use in the industry about accommodating all modes of travel, not just cars. And this past year in 2023, there was a new directive that was implemented that kind of strengthens those policies and makes complete streets elements at the same level as the design elements that we have for the roadway. So in a similar way that if we're designing a roadway and it doesn't have the standard shoulder width or something of that nature, if we were designing a project and we can't meet various criteria to include facilities for bicycles or pedestrians, we have to get a similar exception through our leadership has to sign off on it, and we have to justify why it's not feasible to do so. So that's going to come into play as we move forward a little bit further into the process. So we're in this planning stage now, and certainly that's part of that's going to inform the planning process. But once we get into those designs, as we look at projects that come out of this study, they will be required to meet those criteria. Any other questions? Feel free to use the chat if you'd rather not speak, or raise your hand if you'd like to. Marcy, could you go to the slide showing our contact info? We can just kind of switch to that. You know, if anybody's typing out any questions or comments, we'll give them some time. So there's many ways to contact us if you think of something right after the meeting or a week later or even further down the line than that. So we have our website, i95stanford.com. You can get in contact with us through that. We have a hotline number that you can call, 203-993-6529. We also have various social media handles. I believe they're all at I-95 Stamford PEL. Or you can email me directly. My email address is here on the screen. So you can sign up for e-blasts on our website so you're notified automatically when we have future meetings and events. And we always publicize those through social media as well if you follow us there. I'll just give folks a little bit more time. Dave Adams, you have your hand up? Should be able to unmute now.
I just had one more question. You know, you outlined the process a little bit earlier, but when is the next opportunity for public to engage with your team on this particular project?
Sure. So as Marcy mentioned, we're looking at later this year, summer, fall timeline before we have another open public workshop like that. We may look at over this past summer, we attended some community events and did some tabling around the city. So we may be out and about in the community ahead of that. Those are more kind of getting the word out and that sort of thing. But later this year, we're expecting to have another public workshop like this. And we should be able to see, Joe. Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, we should be able to see some of these alternatives and a little bit more of the process. Michael, you have your hand up and clear to unmute.
Yeah, just briefly, I appreciate the opportunity to comment earlier. I just want to mention, you know, you guys are sure you know all about BRT because of alignment to Oxford and Britain. But you know, now is the time to really take seriously that we've got two systems. You've got I-95 and you've got Metro North. That's great, but there needs to be a third system, and that's something that can BRT is so flexible to have that run between 95 and Route 1, could feed into the various town centers. There needs to be this tertiary system to get cars off of 95, to take pressure off of Metro North. And it's something that could grow into the future. So I just want to close with two things. That's the project in Stamford could be the prototype. It could be the very beginning of the system. There's an elevated viaduct, if there's lanes added, whatever it is, it should be for BRT and HOV exclusively. And, in Connecticut, there's some certain conventions that are predictable, but it's really time to make this big step, to make a big stride for something very different. BRT is applied all over the world in very innovative, technically innovative ways. So I urge you all on this team to just do not preclude the possibility that this project could be the beginning of accommodating that system all the way up to New Haven. I'm talking, something very bold. And then lastly, we have a Facebook page. It's informal. It's fun. We could do some better graphics, but there's a lot of posts there about BRT. If you're not familiar with bus rapid transit, for those who are in the meeting, I'm sure most of you are. It's a lot of us are transportation laws, so we're really interested in this stuff. But we do have that page. It's simply called BRT Fairfield New Haven. So again, I want to thank you for the time, and I appreciate your willingness to hear us out.
No, thank you. Thank you for your participation. And we certainly will take into consideration all the comments that we get, such as yours, as we move forward. So thank you again. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to keep going. But I used to live south of 95, and I go back and forth every once in a while. And I have experienced on a number of occasions that tractor trailers have a really hard time, and I'm sure this has been a consideration when you rebuilt the bridges over at Atlantic Street, and I know that there was a couple other bridges that were rebuilt. But tractor trailers have a really hard time getting underneath that roadway, and that area also suffers from a propensity to flood due to heavy rains, or I think just a couple of weeks ago, the entire area was flooded out because of some sort of water break. I just want to, I'm sure this is on the top of your brain, but I think that it may be important for there to be considerations, or just take a note that, there should be considerations regarding the propensity to flooding in the area as it exists right now, and the very tight margin that you have to get tractor trailers underneath the bridges where it is less likely to flood. So the whole roadway likely needs to go up. And I understand that may be cost prohibitive, but it's something to think about, and I hope it's considered. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you for your comments. Yeah, our design standards, both for rail and highway underpasses, do require that we look at vertical clearances so that trucks can get underneath them. So yeah, as you mentioned, there's only so much that we can bring those roads that go under these bridges down due to drainage concerns being so close to sea level here. And so we may look at some combination, I suppose, as far as raising the roads that go over and lowering the roads that go under. But certainly something we consider. Any other thoughts? Okay, well, I think we'll adjourn. The time is 1:11, so maybe we'll stop the recording now, and we can always hang around for a little bit longer to take any lingering questions. But thank you again for joining us during the middle of your day. We really appreciate it, and all the great questions and comments that we got. So thank you so much.